What's up, Cybernetic, and welcome back to a special video about backend as a service solutions and especially alternatives to the all-known Firebase. In the past, I've been a big fan of Firebase and I still like the concept in general of a cloud backend, but there are certain downsides to using Firebase. You're locked in, you got only a NoSQL database, you can't really see the internals, and there are people who really got a lot of problems with the pricing and unexpected high bills. So today I want to show you 3 alternatives to Firebase, which are number 1, Supabase, number 2, Appwrite, and number 3, a platform called Nhost, or probably Nhost, I don't know exactly. And I want to show you these solutions because there's a lot of money flowing into the backend as a service sector. Supabase got more than 30 million funding. Appwrite got close to 30 million funding, and Nhost got an initial 3 million seed funding a few years ago. So there is a lot of money flowing into the sector, and I'm pretty sure we can expect some cool developments in the future, which is just great for us as developers. Because let's be honest, if you're a junior developer or starting out, building a website with JavaScript and HTML, perhaps also using a framework, isn't that hard. But once you want to add user authentication, file upload, protecting data, stuff like that, it's really like a massive jump from building a website to doing all these things, potentially even with your own backend, and you don't even know how to build a backend or host it. So this is really where cloud backends shine. You get all the authentication, storage, security, and a bunch of other things out of the box. They are different in terms of the technologies they use, the databases they use, or which exact functionalities they offer based on the maturity of the platform. So we're gonna inspect the 3 solutions and in the end talk about which of them might be preferred in your specific situation. But for now, let's dive into those cool backends. Okay, first backend we take a look at is Supabase. Probably the most popular, although Appwrite is pretty close to it. Supabase marketed itself as the open source Firebase alternative. Right out of the gate, the punchline against Firebase. Also on GitHub, Supabase is an open source Firebase alternative. We're building the features of Firebase using enterprise grade open source tools. And that's pretty much a great summary of what Supabase does and what it does differently compared to Firebase. So instead of having everything behind the paywall, or everything is just the core of Firebase you're not really seeing, Supabase relies on only open source tools. And we're gonna see that this is the same for all the other backends that we check out as well. So we have a Postgres database, which is also one main difference to Firebase, because Firebase uses a document-based NoSQL database. In here, you got a traditional SQL database. We got otherwise all the things you expect from a cloud backend. So we got authentication and authorization out of the box. You even got auto-generated APIs, a cool REST API, which is a nice benefit. Real-time subscriptions possible even with a SQL database. GraphQL coming in the future. At this point, also functions available both for database triggers and edge functions, which are pretty much cloud functions as far as I know, file storage, and of course a nice dashboard. So from the outside, Supabase really just tries to replicate everything that we got in Firebase in an open source kind of way, using open source projects. Everything is open, and although you usually get started with Supabase like you get with Firebase, you can actually also use the self-hosting approach. This is for some companies pretty interesting, and we're gonna take a look at this for the other backends as well. I haven't done this by now, but it's definitely possible. So the possibility exists, which makes this a pretty cool option in general. Otherwise, if you're just an indie maker, regular small developer, getting started with Supabase is pretty easy. You just create your tables. They even got some somewhere in the SQL editor, they got some snippets. So you gotta play around with SQL if you wanna use Supabase. Yes, there are certain snippets here that you can use, like a Slack clone, but of course that won't cover all your needs of your application. But those are pretty cool snippets. You have to learn a bit of SQL. You can actually also create the table with a table editor at this point, so you can create a new table. You can enable the row level security. We're going to talk about that in a second. Add all the columns and just do it through the UI. That's possible. As I said, authentication, of course, all of them have authentication and storage out of the box. So there's not a big difference between the different cloud backend in terms of general functionality. So we always got authentication, we got a database, we got file storage. Most of them have some kind of cloud functions that you can run. And in terms of security, they are sometimes a bit different. So for Firebase, we are writing those Firebase security rules, which look sometimes kind of strange. For Supabase, you use the SQL row level security, which looks, is there something like role permissions? Yeah, I think, no. Where is it? Authorize the role based. Yeah, that's last. I guess this is close to row level security. Oh, here we got as well. Create the different policies, which user can access, which data or which row. It's kind of good, but at the same time, it's also maybe a bit complicated for new users. There could be some more docs about all of these things regarding SQL, because in general, the API, where's the documentation? There used to be, in usual, they have a pretty good documentation right here. I just can't find it because I'm an idiot. Here's the documentation. They got a bunch of quick start guides. They of course have SDK, so I create an application with Angular. There it is. So from Angular, they all look kind of the same. They all got a great either JS or even TypeScript package, which you can use. The usage is sometimes a bit different, how you generate the initial client or how you handle authentication, but usually it's just one line to sign up a user or to sign in a user. The database usage is different between the cloud APIs, the cloud backends. So for Supabase, a query might look like this, pretty close to actual SQL, I think. So that's the broad idea of Supabase. In terms of the community, I found Supabase to be, I think, the biggest or second biggest. So on GitHub, we have 31k stars, a bit more, and we got, not that this is really important, but close to 30k Twitter followers. This is somehow important because you need a great community for a platform like this, because then you get faster support, you get answers to your questions. So I wouldn't totally ignore this, and Supabase is pretty great. They are running hackathons, they're pretty hard in the meme game. Basically every day they are posting some kind of meme, so they're pretty active on social. Now, what's probably also important is the pricing. You know, with Firebase, it can be kind of unpredictable, and you might fear getting a super high bill at some point because you're billed for, I don't know how many calls. With Supabase, you usually have a more predictable pricing, and that's, I think, how they also want to differentiate from Firebase mostly. Yes, of course, you can also self-host it. In that case, it's pretty much, well, I don't think you're paying anything for Supabase then. Please, Supabase team, jump in if this is wrong. But otherwise, they have a really predictable pricing in terms of the project usage, which you can check out here. Again, you can get started with for free, and I totally recommend you check out Supabase. I have used it in a few projects and I really enjoyed it so far. Backend option number 2 we want to explore is Appwrite. I actually discovered Appwrite recently because they got a lot of funding, close to 30 million, which really caught my attention, as this is pretty much the same as Supabase. So it is also still in beta. I like the Supabase colors a bit more. That's my own preference. Actually, we can go to dark mode as well if you prefer that. Then it looks totally different. So it markets itself as secure open source backend server for web, mobile, and Flutter developers. It's actually interesting that they mention Flutter here, and I think in the past I've seen even more focus on Flutter. So in general, I think Appwrite, as the name also indicates, is more targeted towards the needs of mobile developers. Although we have a web in here, I feel like it's kind of targeting a bit more the mobile market. Anyway, again, we got open source technology in the background, and that technology looks like this. Can we do this a bit bigger? So this is the architecture of the system, if you want to see it. And the interesting part about Appwrite is that you can very, very easily self-host all of this. So they offer, to get started, a simple Docker command. I must admit, I haven't used Docker a lot, like pretty much never before. But I could install this, and I was running Docker desktop on my Mac, and I could easily install the Appwrite platform. It was really just a matter of minutes to set this initial console up, which I found pretty interesting. So if you're interested in completely owning your own data, that makes sense, Appwrite might be your preferred solution, as Appwrite is really about self-hosting. At the same time, I asked myself, okay, so how do they make money? There's no kind of pricing up here, but what I found is, of course, they are going for a cloud platform in the future as well. So building with Appwrite has never been easier. Others started with having a cloud platform and then later offered the self-hosting. Appwrite came from self-hosting and now offers cloud in the future. So that means I'm pretty sure with Appwrite cloud hosting, they will make some kind of money, because if you got 30 million funding, there has to be some serious business plan behind Appwrite. Now, in terms of technology, once again, complete backend solution for Flutter, Vue, React. They're really targeting the mobile market here very strongly. In terms of technology, you can actually use whatever database you prefer. So if you check out the diagram again, that's completely up to you which database you use. So you could plug in a regular SQL database, MySQL, or you could also use MongoDB. Appwrite, of course, comes with the default functionalities for user authentication. We got a REST API, we got GraphQL API coming soon, we got real-time. We got, as far as I know, cloud storage, exactly. We got cloud functions, so pretty much the same like Supabase or Firebase as well. What I found a bit unique about Appwrite is I think they're putting a lot of focus on user management. That's also what I saw in, I haven't started, in a YouTube video where one of the developers was talking about it. So they have a heavy focus on creating users, creating teams, and setting up these things. Of course, they got the OAuth stuff figured out, all of this. But having this approach of users and teams, I think they mentioned if you want to do something like Netflix, so not in terms of real Netflix functionality, but in terms of the user management and the groups, that's what you can easily do with Appwrite. So that's pretty interesting. Again, I really like that I have this dashboard here hosted on localhost. All of this is my own data, and I could easily spin this up on DigitalOcean, because you see him announcing one-click droplets on DigitalOcean. Brandon. Brandon was actually also in the video and offered me help on Twitter. So thanks again, Brandon, for reaching out. I found this a big plus for actually all of the three. So Brandon reached out when I tweeted something. I had the founder from Supabase immediately reach out in the past when I was writing about them, and I got some swag for Supabase, and Also, the creator of the third backend Nhost, what we will look at, jumped into a conversation. So all of them are pretty great in the community. And actually, I just saw that Appwrite has a massive Twitter following, even more than Supabase. So Appwrite and Supabase, although Appwrite wasn't really, I wasn't really aware of Appwrite, is at least at the same level of Supabase in terms of community, perhaps even a step further along. So in terms of pricing, as I said, there's no pricing because you can easily self-host it. In the future, you might be able to use cloud. We have seen the diagram. And then I also wanted to, I don't know, I like this page from Brian. Not sure why. Great page. Brian looks like I don't know, Notion document. Anyway, I found something where someone from the Appwrite team left a comment. So let me see. So here it is. Appwrite is more about simplicity. Our SDKs are simple. Now UI is simple. Documentation. Use a part of Appwrite or all of it. Heck, go dig in our code or check out our open sourced functions. We don't care. We just want you to do more while writing less code. And I found this pretty much to be true. I think they're abstracting away a bit of the other things that you can do that we've seen in Supabase, and Appwrite just tries to make this a bit easier. I don't know exactly how well the security works. So you can set permissions, read access, write access, either for a whole collection, like a table in SQL, or for a specific document based on user ID, team ID, or role. Well, I don't know if this also works like the Supabase rules, which you can just define up front, or if you just really need to set this on every call. But of course, I also made a little example. So again, all of these backends have a great SDK. You can just import Appwrite. I found this code snippet. I don't know why we're creating this static client, but maybe I'm going to actually use this in other cases as well, because actually the approach is pretty good. So with that in place, again, a sign up looks like this. Importing the API from my helpers, getting the account and then calling create. I can create a session to log in the user, or interacting with the database could look like this to simply create a document. So again, Appwrite, super easy to get started. They also got a CLI and really good documentation, especially once again focused on the mobile field. We got web, Flutter, Apple, Android, but of course you could also target your backend directly from a server. As you can see, we got code examples in all the languages, so really great documentation here. Big community, very reactive community, also Twitter, Discord. So if you're interested in self-hosting your backend, give Appwrite a try. One additional backend that I wanted to present you is Nhost or Nhost. I actually don't know how you pronounce this, but I saw Nhost, how you want to call it, Nhost, recently, because they also got 3 million seed funding, and because that initial page here actually looks pretty amazing. They take a, well, slightly different approach with a focus on GraphQL and the technologies used. So again, we got serverless backend for web and mobile apps. We don't need to manage infrastructure, so Nhost is again about they host everything for us. It's not self-hosted like we've seen with Appwrite. We got pretty much the same features, only this time it's really just about using a GraphQL database, but then we got file storage, the functions, we got real-time, and we got even some additional use case related things like image transformation on the fly, payment with Stripe integration coming soon, of course, permissions and authentication, and even transaction emails, which makes this a pretty interesting service with a few use cases implemented for us. So this could really be one of the big differences, because Appwrite is, well, it's a great, looks great, but it doesn't cover very specific cases. It has a bit about geolocation and localization, but nothing really like this. Of course, it is about not managing your infrastructure here with Nhost, and about GraphQL, user management, file storage. With the CLI, you can also develop locally. I haven't tested this, but I'm pretty sure it also works quite easily, as this is one of the main features as well. Now, disclaimer, I've only used this for a very little test with Nhost because a second thing I have to admit today, after what was the first? Yeah, well, whatever first thing was, but this one is using GraphQL, and I usually just used a REST API in the past. Yeah, GraphQL is cool and all of these, and you can now flame me below the video. I will certainly check it out in the future, perhaps even with Nhost, but so far I'm really an GraphQL newbie. Anyway, we can easily create an application like I did, and you can install it. Again, there's the JS package, of course, for us available. In code, it pretty much looks exactly like this. So I created this, a new Nhost client. I can sign in, I can sign up, or this is apparently how you request data from GraphQL. I think I get the concept, and I think I actually like the concept, so I'll definitely get more into this, but this is just a very small example. Now, in terms of general audience size, we must talk about this. Nhost only got 2.5k stars on GitHub at the time checking out, but it was usually among the trending repositories. And on Twitter, well, it's lagging a bit behind, but still, this is a great start of 11k followers. Once again, all of them offer direct access to a Discord channel, and again, the creator from Nhost also reached out. Johan, thanks for your support, and I think Johan was also interested in some more Ionic specific examples, so that's pretty good news. Now, again, in terms of the infrastructure, here's the architecture of Nhost. We got the GraphQL and authentication based on the PostgreSQL database, and storage and Lambda functions, storage related to S3. Pretty much a very typical cloud setup, and I think there's nothing wrong about this setup. In reality, if we check out the project, we can go directly into Hasura. Once again, I haven't used with GraphQL, so I also haven't used Hasura, but I read that setting up security rules within Hasura is a lot easier than with, for example, Supabase, the role level security. But I can only see this. It pretty much looks a bit like MySQL clients or PHP MyAdmin or whatever it was in the past, but of course for our GraphQL database. Besides that, of course, we got the user management here where we can set up everything. We got also sign-in methods like the magic link. We got the file storage, so everything. We also got functions, of course, which you can directly deploy from your GitHub repository. So everything in here also looks pretty stable and good. Yes, this is still in beta, and it's a lot smaller compared in funding to Appwrite and Supabase. But I think what we see here is a great beginning for another product. Also, of course, based on open source technologies, but this one with a clear focus on GraphQL and also the serverless part that you don't need to host this. Once again, this in the end comes down to your preference. So if you prefer to self-host something, this might not be for you, but if Nhost becomes more popular, we might still see like a cloud or later after the cloud version, a self-hosted version in the future, if they get time for this. But of course, in the early stages, you can't work on everything. They're perhaps working on these things right now, which might be pretty interesting. They're working maybe in even more documentation, because the documentation is also not, it's a pretty small documentation compared to the other contenders. But anyway, if you're into GraphQL and want to check out something fresh, which looks from the outside pretty interesting, go give Nhost a try. Alright, and that's it so far for the details about our 3 competitors to Firebase. Now, let's talk about where each of them specifically shines. For Supabase, I would just say Supabase tries to mimic very closely what Firebase offers. They are going through a list of features that Firebase has, and they're replicating them with open source technology. So if you're only looking for a replacement of Firebase, Supabase might be the thing you want to use. Plus, of course, with Supabase, you're using SQL instead of the document-based NoSQL Firebase database. So that is the biggest difference. If you're focused a lot about privacy, about data security, about owning the data, then I think Appwrite got you covered, because Appwrite focus to me seems to be especially on self-hosting this solution. I don't know exactly how they're going to monetize that way, or if they're going to monetize everything through the cloud offering they plan for the future. But with Appwrite, you can easily spin up a Docker container. We've seen the one-click deployment, and it's just too easy to self-host your backend with Appwrite. Plus, of course, I think there is a tiny focus on mobile within Appwrite, and also on user groups, user authentication, teams, and just managing that kind of users. So if you're trying to just build a mobile application, perhaps Appwrite is a more specific solution. And if you're big into GraphQL and that technology, I think Nhost got you covered, because they have a clear focus on this. Supabase and Appwrite might add GraphQL in the future, but with Nhost, you really got that focus right now. It looks good to me on the outside, but we have to say, of course, it is the smallest competitor in that space. It is still very beta, and you know what happened to BaaS a few years ago. So that, of course, could still also happen to Supabase or to Appwrite, not only Nhost, but that's, of course, always the problem you have with selecting a cloud backend. So be aware of the BaaS situation, but otherwise, Nhost might be small, but still looking very, very promising. What I think is missing in all of these solutions are actually a few things that make Firebase a great solution, especially for mobile developers. And there are 3 key things that I immediately jump to my mind. Number 1, push notifications. A very common use case for all mobile applications, and with Firebase you got the messaging right built in. Of course, they got a little advantage because Google is in the background, but I still think maybe Appwrite could do this better with their focus on mobile applications. So making it easy to send push notifications. Maybe that's also included already and I just haven't found it, but otherwise, Appwrite team, maybe jump into the comments and leave your opinion about this. Number 2, dynamic links. Firebase offers this, and I think it's a cool addition, and it can be really helpful to segment your audience, the users of your application. So dynamic links might be something for those solutions. And finally, for mobile apps, crash reports could be a great addition. Again, Firebase is this big all-in-one solution which basically got everything covered. But I think if you're gonna focus on apps like Appwrite, perhaps adding something like crash reports could be that initial this additional little thing that gets mobile developers into your cloud backend. Finally, there are of course many more solutions. They're probably not as mature as the others, but one is definitely a really great solution, that is AWS Amplify. If you want to see more about AWS Amplify, please leave a comment and I'm happy to discover it. But of course, also same for the other 3 platforms that we've seen. If you want to see Ionic tutorials about them, just leave a comment below and I'm gonna make it happen. I really enjoy testing all of these solutions, and I think they have all come to a very mature position already. Just give them a try and pick the one you're most comfortable with. If you're more into privacy, if you're more into cloud hosting, self-hosting, really, they're just tiny differences between them. But overall, all of them are a great solution for your next project. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the upcoming videos. And of course, if you also want to build a great front end, check out the Ionic Academy, which is my place to help you with everything about the Ionic framework. I hope you enjoyed this. I will catch you in the next video. So until then, happy coding, Simon.